You good? Very good. All right, whenever you're ready, we're ready.
A show that believes alongside Dr. Krakowian that suicide is our way of saying to God, you can't fire me, I quit. Terrible opening to a show called Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. Aired July 25th, 1993. Nowadays, you would never hear anything like that. That would just be removed from the script entirely. And that's because of censorship. The benefits of censorship include just being able to control what people say on air, as well as what sensitive subjects are in politics or in social issues. But the thing is that it controls the information that we see. So that means we don't see all sides of the politics and all sides of social issues. Politics were censored not only in the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour in 1969. The social issues were censored in the Richard Pryor show, and the offensive and insensitive material was censored in Bill Maher's show, Politically Incorrect. And that still affected society because those things were aired. So to the political end of things, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour with Tom and Dick Smothers aired on February 5th, 1967. They offered what seemed to be a safe alternative to the growing counterculture of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They were safe, according to what Silverman says about CBS, who's signed them. They went on to try and get Pete Seeger, who was known as a folk artist during the time, to join on their show. He initially was able to be broadcasted to Canada and not America. They canceled it for America. But then the second time around, he was broadcasted to America as well. Professor of Politics Peter Dreyer, in his 2018 article in the American Prospect, said he was blacklisted from network television since the 1950s because of his leftist politics. Essentially, he was a communist, and that was not a great thing to have in that time, in '67. He sang the song Waist Deep in the Big Money, which says, but every time I read the papers, that old feeling comes on, we're waist deep in the big money, and the big fool says push on. This was supposedly about Lyndon Johnson in the Vietnam policies that he made during that time. Also during this time, the U.S. really needed troops to go to war. The government was all pro-war, and many people were anti-war. And there was so much anti-war propaganda and protest going on during that time. And this aired to 12 million different people, many of whom were put up for draft later on, and many of whom would dodge the draft too. Supporters began to drop them because they got money from the war happening, and the show was canceled a little over a year later after Pete Seeger's performance. This was in order to protect the war effort, although that's not always the case. On the social end of things, the Richard Pryor Show, which aired on September 13th, 1977, happened at the same time as Happy Days, and during the same primetime hours of family time. And according to Audrey Thomas McCluskey, in her 2008 book, Richard Pryor, he meant to destroy barriers, transverse the invisible racial wall, and enlarge the terrain of what was permissible on television. He did exactly that, but it was taken really negatively. Racism was shown throughout the show, white on black and black on white. In the first episode, one of the skits was based on a Mississippi rape trial coming from the To Kill a Mockingbird trial. And so that included an African-American man having supposedly raped a white woman. Robert Williams made an appearance in this episode. He was defending the prosecuted, and Pryor played Ed Garvey, one of the meanest white prosecutors of the South that the South has ever seen. The women in the area were talking, and they were discussing the lynching that was going to be happening afterwards. They believed that if what everything the woman said was true, that she would have committed suicide. That's what they said, and obviously that's very racist and super controversial. At the end of the skit, the man was proved innocent, and Robin Williams, the defense attorney, was actually sent up for the lynching. The show became even more offensive and violent with skits like the Black Death concert, where Pryor played the lead guitarist and singer in a heavy metal band. He was giving out drugs to the audience and spraying them with DDT, which is an insecticide that was hazardous to people, and it was given out to the primarily white audience that was eventually killed off. He later then picked up a machine gun from off the side of the stage and shot down the rest of the audience. According to Silverman, after a performance in which he kills his audience, he triumphantly walks off stage. And then Silverman also notes that an unknown San Francisco columnist deemed him a black racist at that point. During this time in the world, the civil rights movement had gained enough momentum that the organizations could start dissipating, and the discussion wasn't being had about racism, but he wanted to start that discussion. It was just a harsh way of doing it, and so it wasn't received well. He even said that it made every black person in America to be on edge and be ready to suddenly drop whatever he or she was doing and run like hell. But this wasn't received well in many ways, not only just how the society received it, but as well as the ratings. In comparison to Happy Days, it was vulgar and wasn't sensitive to families, so it was censored. Overall, reasons for censorship include political, societal, and even just offensive terminology and everything like that. So they may have worked in this time, but in the time that they existed, they wouldn't be allowed, and it was very difficult to get the point across. So the shows themselves were censored, but the ideas were not. As Tommy Smothers sums it up quite nicely, the only valid censorship of ideas is the right of people not to listen.